Okay. Good
All right,
afternoon,
we are
everybody.
live.
Hello. This is Bobby Hughes, and I'm the executive director for the Eastern Pennsylvania Coalition for Abandoned Mine Reclamation. And today, the Abandoned Mine Reclamation Chronicles is going to be bringing on our Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection's secretary, Jessica Shirley. And our show is kind of a one of a kind podcast that is conversing with a lot of passionate community-minded partners, state agency folks, volunteers in our watershed community. And we're trying to highlight outstanding reclamation efforts and community cleanups and restoration work, and showcasing different types of stream improvement successes, and really sharing emergent ideas and technologies to reclaim and remediate Pennsylvania's legacy abandoned mine lands on past mining impacted watersheds throughout the Commonwealth. And today, I'm your host, and I'm joined by my colleague and co host, Andy McAllister from the Western Pennsylvania Coalition for Abandoned Mine Reclamation as their regional coordinator. And we have with us Jessica Shirley, who Andy will take over and make an introduction here.
Thanks, Bobby. Yeah, we're really excited to start this project. And this project basically came about as a result of a joint visioning session that the two cameras had last fall, looking at ways we can work together to get our message out, if you will. First, we have to thank the Foundation for Pennsylvania Watersheds because they are underwriting the first 12 episodes of the Abandoned Mine Reclamation Chronicles podcast, and we're hopeful that live streaming personal interviews and discussing timely topics related to AMR will engage our audiences on a new level. So feel free to put your questions and comments into the comments box of wherever you are joining us. So wherever you are joining us from, there's a question or comments box. Please put your comments in there, and we'll be ready to go. Bobby?
All right. Well, thank you, Andy. And I'll take a few minutes here and I'll kind of give a little bit of a background on Jessica and introduce her and let her fill us in with some later questions that we have for her. But just know that Jessica now serves as the secretary for the Department of Environmental Protection's DEP, as we call it, and she's playing a pivotal role in the guidance of the department and its mission to protect and preserve Pennsylvania's environment while fostering sustainable and equitable practices across the Commonwealth. Jessica arrived at the role of the secretary with extensive experience within the agency, and before her role as secretary, she served as the executive deputy secretary, overseeing a lot of programs. As the first appointed infrastructure implementation coordinator for DEP, she's oversaw the influx and massive amount of funding that's come into Pennsylvania by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that we call IIJA, and the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the IRA. She's ensured that the department has kind of used all the available funds for the betterment of Pennsylvania's environment, the economy, our residents, and our communities. And in this role, she's really placed a strong emphasis on consideration of the impact of the programs in our historically underinvested and underserved communities. And in her previous role as the policy director for from I think May of 2016 through 2022, that was kind of marked by her dedication to shaping the environmental and energy policy agenda within the state. And in that position, she helped to develop some groundbreaking executive orders related to PFAS and climate change, energy conservation and sustainability in the Commonwealth's operations, and also in environmental justice. So, I mean, she has got a really wealth of knowledge and experience within the department, and there's no need for me to maybe go into much further her background in the policy office and as the environmental policy specialist, but she can do that as we continue on with the conversation here today, and we will bring her in and let Andy get some more questions in to find out more about Jessica.
Thank you, Bobby. Welcome, Jessica. How wonderful to have you on the Abandoned Mine Reclamation Chronicles. We're so happy you could take the time to do this. Um, First of all, we want to learn about you personally. Where are you from? About your family. Can you tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So first, thank you so much for the invitation to join you. Always happy to talk about a lot of the environmental successes and the challenges that we have. And I think that the topic that you gentlemen work on every single day is one of the biggest of both of those successes and challenges. So just appreciate you reaching out. So I'm Jessica Shirley. To answer your question, where did I grow up? I grew up in Shippensburg, which is a town in south central Pennsylvania. It's a small town. There's a university there. Um, and it doesn't have any type of mining. There's quarries, there's above ground stuff, but there's nothing of the traditional mining. Um, so I would say that I'm pretty fortunate to not have experienced impacts like that in my environment growing up, like a lot of other folks did. But that doesn't mean that I any less passionate about Pennsylvania's environment and the areas that are impacted by it. It's a rural area, but I think it gave me really good perspective of how a lot of towns in Pennsylvania work, how they operate, how they how people get to work. My parents live in the town that they have always lived in. They have always worked in. I don't even think that they've ever commuted more than like 6 minutes to their place of employment. And I think there are a lot of people like that in Pennsylvania. So I think growing up there gave me a really great perspective into the small towns that really shape the state that we live in.
Can you tell us a little bit about where you're currently from and your family? Yeah.
So I recently actually just moved. It was really not the best decision I've ever made. I was going through a confirmation process and decided that I was going to move my family. So we didn't move far, but we did change school districts. And I currently reside in Camp Hill, which is actually just across the river. I could probably see my neighborhood from where I'm sitting now, which is great. I have two daughters. One is 16 and one is 3. So I have an incredible, age spread. And you would think that it would probably make it easier, but it really doesn't. The 16-year-old is super busy with sports and activities and school, and she doesn't drive yet. She does have her learner's permit, which is a whole different ballgame. And then I also have the 3-year-old who is still very reliant on me personally for things, like making sure that she is clean and bathed and dressed. So at least I don't have to deal with that with the 16-year-old, but it's quite a spread.
Bobby, I think you had a question.
Oh, you're muted, Bobby. We can't hear you.
You're muted.
Oh, that's right. There we go. I'm back on here. Yeah, I was, curious about. I know your one daughter. We talked about this maybe at a previous event we attended. That she had played AAU basketball, and I had done some coaching for many, many years with my oldest son and my oldest daughter, and we did the same thing. And so I can kind of relate, but I just remember the travel, the hotels, and the referees, of course, and then at the end, the parents, right? So I was wondering
too.
That's kind of why I got out of it and retired from the AAU game and the circuit. But I was wondering if you could share maybe just how you're juggling some of your responsibilities as a parent, and then your career as an environmental leader, especially now in a really demanding position.
I actually think having a teenager and a toddler is a really great way to keep yourself humble. Especially in a role like this, right? Because you look at a 16-year-old will be like, why are you wearing that? And I'm like, oh, okay. Thanks. Feeling great about myself. And then the toddler will very quickly remind you, what it's really all about, and what your priority certainly should be. but yes, my daughter, so she played soccer for 10 years at least. And she recently decided to go all in on basketball. She played both for, probably the same amount of time. But that actually, it helped me kind of see all of the little towns and things. If your kid plays a travel sport, like, you're going everywhere.
Yep.
And where some of these fields are, you're like, really, they put a field here. That's fun. But with AAU, it's taking us a little bit further. We're going to other states. I spend a lot of time up your way, Bobby, in Scranton.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I swear I've seen like the inside of every gym, like within a 4-hour drive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you get really good with the calendar. You have to. I swear, I tell people, I'm like, if it's not on my calendar, it's not going to happen. I
Right.
will not be there. I will forget about it. So it takes really good planning, great assistant, who is like, you're off today. Remember, you're going to, wherever, New Jersey. And it takes a really great team, behind me that I can rely on, that I know that, on those days, whenever I do have the family obligations, that they're not going to let anything fall while I'm taking care of those obligations. And I would say that that's kind of a standard that I like to set for my whole team, right? Because we are leaders, we are government leaders, but we're also people, and we have family and we have other obligations. And it's really important that we're able to meet those. And sometimes that does mean that maybe I'm picking up the slack for someone else that day because they have to go take care of something. But we try to create an atmosphere here at DEP that you are allowed to be a human. You are allowed to have those other obligations, but we work really, really hard together as a team to better the environment of Pennsylvania.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, and I figured you did that. I share in some of those sentiments that you're talking about, and I also have a 16-year-old with my son, but not into sports as much, but more into anime cons and comic cons and dressing up like it's Halloween every day. But I get to go to
That
all these
sounds fun.
places with him. Instead of basketball in my later life here, we're going to comic cons dressed up as various characters that he enjoys, and I have some fun with it as well. So getting around with him and doing the kind of things you're doing with your daughter and your younger daughter is relatable, and I think it's fun at the same time. So it does keep you humble and even tired, but you get through it. You get through it.
For sure.
Now, Jessica, I know you said you did not grow up in mining area. Has anyone in your family been involved in mining, coal mining?
Not that I'm aware of. So my one grandfather was a farmer. My other was just kind of like a factory worker. My father was a factory worker. My mother, worked in an office. But I did go when I went to IUP for my undergrad, Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And that, I think, was probably my first exposure to what AMD is. That whole area, Indiana, Cambria County, was really a hotbed for mining and mining activities. And I was there in the early 2000s, and you could kind of see in the history of the town that it was really built around mining. There are these very large, beautiful buildings that used to say like Indiana Mining Company on it. And this was not long after, I would say, the collapse, of the mining industry of the 80s. And there were a lot of those buildings that were not redeveloped, or were not being, used in a way that, I would just say, like, you could kind of see like the legacy of the industry within the town. And now it was like a bank, or it was just sitting empty. And the economic driver that it used to be was no more. And that area, like now, there's really no groundwater that can be used, and most of the surface water is impacted by AMD. Um, so the friends that I made that were from that area, it was just so interesting that they were like, oh yeah, it's just like it's from the mines. It's just kind of like how it was, right? Because that's how they grew up. But for me, like I grew up playing in the streams of, Caledonia State Park, where, it was a mountain stream and it was clear and cold. We didn't care. But never really had to even think or know what acid mine drainage was, or really even think about, an industry. I was an economics major. And one of my favorite classes I ever took was on the economic history of the United States, which probably, might as well have been the economic history of Western Pennsylvania, because so much of the class was focused on Western Pennsylvania, the mining industries, the shipping industries, the canals, the railroads, and really, all of it was driven a lot by mining in the mining industry, the way that things moved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Given the fact that you have experienced orange creeks and dicks and patch towns, etc., and waste coal piles in the areas that you went to school at, have you had a chance to visit treatment systems yet in your career
Oh
as
yeah.
secretary? You have. Where
Yeah,
have you
so
been?
I have. So one of the things within my career trajectory is that I've always like valued is learning. I remember whenever I was in college, I told my mom, I just want to be a professional student. And she was like, we can't afford that. Um, but it was so great to find a career like I have in environmental policy, because there is no shortage of learning and being a professional student. And I really think that I feel like I am a professional student of environmental policy. And I am constantly learning and thinking. And I mean, but one of the things of part of learning, right, is listening. Listening to people, listening to how things impact them, listening to their perspectives, considering those things. So I have made it a big priority, being in this role as secretary, to go out and learn and to see and to listen. And that I do that with my people. I do that with my partners, folks like you. And, I do that with just, regular people, like my parents. And last year, we went out to, I guess it was earlier this year. Everything seems like a long time ago, and also yesterday at the same time in this role. But back in the spring, the Lieutenant Governor, Austin Davis, and I unveiled the treatment facility at Blacklick Creek, or Blacklick Creek, if you're from the area.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, such a beautiful area, right? Straddling the Cambria County, Indiana County line. And just degraded, and really really interesting to learn the history of how long it's been a problem and the different ways that we've dealt with the problem. I think initially the problem was that the acid mine drainage was coming through people's basements. It was coming up from the mines underground into people's basements. So we drilled boreholes in the stream to alleviate the pressure in the mine, to prevent it from people going into prevent the water from going into people's basements, to have it actually go into streams. And that was, something that was done 30, 40 years ago. And now we were able, with the influx of money that we had from the IIJA, to be able to put a treatment facility there to actually, get the iron out of that water and treat that water and pump those mines, and be able to have clean water in that creek. And it was huge, huge in size, but also huge in impact. And to hear folks about how, this AMD has impacted their lives and their ability to recreate, and how this treatment facility was going to change all of that. It was just really inspiring. And, just great work from everybody, because it's not just DEP. There's a whole lot of partners that work on projects like that.
And along with this, we have the hosts here, us, have put in the chat a link to blacklickcreekwatershed.org. If you are able to see the viewers out there, the chat, go to that, because it'll have the Black Lick Creek treatment plant on there. That has been a tremendous success from what I understand. And the boreholes, I think we referred to them at the time as the Three Sisters, coming up in the middle of the creek, like a big fountain, a horrible, horrible fountain full of aluminum. And so we're very looking forward to that treatment system making a positive impact on the creek. I think, Bobby, as Jessica was talking about her career path, I think you had some questions about her career path.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of looking back as you're talking about going to IUP, and in that role is the sort of as you came out of that and went into the infrastructure implementation coordinator, you kind of been overseeing a lot of the funding that you're talking about. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, how challenging that might have been or is still, and what the key considerations are for, how is that funding being utilized in areas across the Commonwealth, particularly in environmental justice areas and communities that are, most heavily impacted. And not all that funding is just for abandoned mines. Obviously, it's really economic development opportunities in areas where, like you said, many of these communities that have the single industry when it was around mining at one time, and now it's not, and it's getting more diverse, and it's bringing potential for job opportunities to areas that have seen a lot of these areas become reclaimed. And I think you and I went to a site, I can't remember if it was last year either, but when we were with Senator Casey at the time, and we were with the Earth Conservancy up here in Nanaco Creek, obviously a $17.5 million stream restoration effort and riparian restoration to improve water quality for the Nanaco Creek and bring back over 15,500 miles of stream to restore a headwaters of a trout stream that can now reconnect the lower reaches of that creek and prevent water from going into the mines that becomes mine drainage that, maybe we don't have to treat. And I'm just wondering how you are seeing that develop and, expand out across the state with this funding.
Yeah. So I know you folks know this, but I don't know that it's commonly known. Pennsylvania has more abandoned mines and impacted streams than any other state in the country. So I put that on lists that I don't like to be at the top of. I have a couple of those, but that's a big one. We actually have 1/3 of the abandoned mines in the entire country. And when you think about the land area of Pennsylvania in comparison to the rest of the country, that's a lot. That's a huge obligation that we have. There are estimates that abandoned mine lands, it would take about $5 billion to clean up all of the abandoned mine lands and mine drainages in Pennsylvania. And that's probably even a little bit low because, things are getting more expensive. Excuse me. Specific to the IIJA funding. So I actually got my first job at Labor and Industry, and I was working on workforce development from ARA, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. Then I came to DEP, started as a policy specialist, did that for 5 years, was a policy director for 6 years, which is probably about 4 years too long. And then the opportunity was basically like another big influx of federal dollars. And that's when I said, like, I really want to be able to do a program like that again and track that and make sure that we're drawing down as much money from the federal government as possible to address these environmental issues, but we're doing it in a way that is most impactful for the people of Pennsylvania. And when you're looking at the amount of investment from the infrastructure bill, it's huge. It's a ton of money. It's $244 million a year for 15 years, but it's still not enough to fully fund the obligation that we have to be able to clean up all of Pennsylvania's abandoned mines. It actually increased the average annual funding that we were receiving because we were always receiving federal dollars. This is basically just those federal dollars then on steroids. And it increased it by about 600% starting in 2023. So we used to get about $50 million a year, which is significant, but it increased it to almost $250 million a year. So if you looked at the time prior to that influx of money, at the previous annual budget amount, it would have taken nearly 100 years to remediate all of the abandoned mines in Pennsylvania. 100 years to remediate it. Now, with the influx of the federal IIJA dollars, we can get almost 60% of the way there in 10 more years. So by the mid 2030s, we can get 60% of the way at remediating our abandoned mine obligations, which takes a huge chunk out of the burden. We were able to create additional positions and bring on, we actually tripled the professional design services from 5 to 15 firms who are working with us to design these types of treatment programs. It was also, I'll just say, because you mentioned it earlier in my bio, IIJA and the Inflation Reduction Act, I think, really put a spotlight on environmental justice through their Justice 40 initiative. But it spotlighted communities like these that have been impacted for a very long time. They've been, underinvested in, and it really showed us, that if you focus dollars to these communities to clean them up, the economic potential, it's already there. That with this environmental remediation, you will see a lot of that economic activity, occur after the remediation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Andy, I think you were maybe going to
My
talk
turn?
about. Yeah, I think so. I think you have a question for
her. One thing also, Jessica, I have to mention, being that we work very closely with the county conservation districts and the watershed groups in these areas that we work in, they are additional partners with the IIJA funding and treatment systems and working toward cleaning up all these things. They I think, as time goes on, will prove to be integral partners in the whole process. And I know everyone is just very happy that they're part of the game, because a lot of other states do not have a good working relationship with their watershed groups and nonprofits. And I think that's one thing Pennsylvania can hang its hat on. You have a very good relationship with those folks. Now, regarding your current position as DEP secretary, with all of the issues that come onto your desk, here's a $25,000 question. What are your top priorities for DEP in addressing these issues?
Well, I think you already mentioned one, and that is really just continuing to partner with our partners. So it is actually part of DEP's mission. It is in our mission statement that we will serve as partners with local governments, nonprofits, to advance, Pennsylvania's environmental outcomes. So continuing to make sure that we are partnering, I think, is a really big deal. But when we're talking about water quality, I just want to, one of the things that I always try to do is educate, because people don't always connect water quality with their own life, or their own, personal use of water. So in Pennsylvania, we have about 13 million people that live here, which is a lot of people. 12 million of them receive their drinking water from a public water system. So this is where, it's not coming from a private well. A lot of folks have private wells. I grew up on a private well. But a lot of people, the majority of people that live in Pennsylvania, receive their drinking water from a public water system. 88% of those people, 88% of the 12 billion that get it from a public water system, it is coming from a surface water intake. So there is a lot of people in Pennsylvania that get their drinking water from surface water. So they should very much care about water quality, about the local water quality that we have here in Pennsylvania, if not for anything else, but just simply their drinking water. There's all other reasons that we know, right? Recreation, the biology, the wildlife, all of that. But even for your own personal selfish reasons, just drinking water should be a reason. But as it relates to our Bureau of Abandoned Mine Reclamation, or BAMR, there really are two priorities that we have. The first one is to continue to operate and maintain the existing acid mine drainage treatment systems, so that the past investments that we have aren't just for naught, because if they're not maintained, your water quality will go back to what it was. So it's continuing to operate and maintain those. The second one, or the second priority, is new projects. So those that really improve water quality, restore the most stream miles, and deliver benefits to downstream ecosystems and communities. We're also working, and I know, Bobby, you're very much aware of this, we're working to ensure AMD remediation is credited in the Chesapeake Bay, since restored streams continue or consume nitrogen and phosphorus as their ecosystems rebound. With 174 stream miles already remediated in the 1900, and nearly 1,900 more that are possible, we think this is really a major opportunity for environmental success. And we are seeing the results of this real time. We're seeing that in our water quality monitoring, that the levels actually look better than what the Chesapeake Bay model says that it should be. And we know that that's because of the AMD treatment and all of the projects that have already occurred.
Bobby, I think you had a comment about Chesapeake Bay and the state water plan. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I think Jessica's absolutely right. And our partners across the Commonwealth, particularly in the Chesapeake Bay, and it's no disservice to any other watersheds that are across the state, because there are 5 larger basins, but just the majority of the Susquehanna River Basin is in the Chesapeake. It just so happens to be here in Pennsylvania, and the development of a new AMD target within the Chesapeake Bay program, and the overall new management plan that they're trying to come up with now. Currently, probably as we speak, there's a management retreat going on for 3 days with the management board that we have already provided a lot of input to that. Yourself and Jill Whitcomb, and as I've been recently designated by the governor to be on the advisory stakeholders advisory committee, and we made sure that our our voices were being heard between Pat McDonald and John Dawes and myself and others in PA to show that, we really need to consider those 1,650 miles at least within the Bay watershed that are impacted by AMD are going to get some consideration in this new plan moving forward. And they're trying to develop that as we speak. And I know that you'll probably be a strong advocate, as will Jill and others within Pennsylvania, to ensure that happens. And there may be even some potential for the governor to step up in a role within the Chesapeake Bay program and the commission soon here, possibly. So I hope that comes to fruition. But I think that the work that we're talking about and the federal money that comes in through like the Environmental Protection Agency and the non-point source program, which really is key to even the success of both of our coalitions, EPCAMR, WIPCAMR, a number of watershed groups and conservation districts that take on the non-point source projects and assessment, and that gets them to design, construction, and development of the treatment systems that we're talking about going forward is just vital to PA. And I just wondered if you have heard anything lately that you from that particular effort, if you could share, or we probably may have to wait until this management board retreat is over and we see what falls out of the plan.
Are you talking about the 319 grants?
The 319 grants, but more so the EPA and the funding for the Chesapeake Bay program, because I think that's overall the larger part of how that's going to get divvied up.
I actually think, calling it a retreat is a misnomer, because those types of meetings are anything other than a retreat. They're a lot of work. Retreat almost implies that it's relaxing. And I can tell you that this topic is not.
You're right.
Nobody is. I think maybe they do that to like entice us to come, Otherwise we'd be like, no, sorry.
Yeah.
But I'm not exactly sure about the Chesapeake Bay, funding. I think everybody's kind of watching the federal budget right now, and the state budget. But what I can say is that we do have a very good working relationship with our state legislature when it comes to funding for clean water, and specifically things like our Section 319 grants. We have a long history of supporting projects that address water quality issues with abandoned mines with those non-point source 319 grants. And over the last 5 years, more than 4.5 million have been awarded to support AMD projects from those specific those federal non-point source grants. Regarding the short-term future of those grants, we were told last month that we will be moving forward with obligating an award. So EPA Region 3, that's who we work with mostly. They're out of Philadelphia. It will be awarding the full fiscal year 2025 319 NPS funding for $5,214,000.
Oh, that's great news. Yeah, that's great news. Good.
Considering what you were talking about, 19 and the federal funding challenges, what can our community do to ensure that programs like 319 continue? Because right now we do not have a federal budget. We do not have a continuing resolution. We're not sure about the future of some of these programs. Can you touch on what our community can do to help share the word about these programs?
I think that's everybody's kind of having that exact same question and that same conversation. I really think it's just an effort in education, making sure that folks are understanding the value and what they're getting for what value they are getting for those dollars. And how meaningful it is to those local communities, because that's really where, that's what everybody should be thinking about. How are we delivering? Anybody in government should be really thinking about how are we delivering service to the people that we represent, the people of Pennsylvania. And I do think it's pretty incumbent on folks like yourself and myself to make sure that they understand that the value, which is exponential beyond just the monetary value.
That's absolutely true, and also the fact that, especially for things like 319 and some of the other reclamation type fundings and project fundings, watershed groups, conservation districts get other sources of funding in, so it builds upon those funds already from the federal government. So it's making a lot more of an effect on our future, on our environment, than just the federal money by itself. So that is
Mhm.
very, very true. Bobby, I think you had a question.
Yeah, just in not just the federal EPA dollars, but like programs like the Growing Greener Plus program that, Andy, we have just talked about, that supports the conservation districts and supports that on the ground type of education and outreach and technical assistance to the communities that we're working with that are, really all trying to work on a watershed scale. They're trying to work in a very multidisciplinary approach to both ag impacts, stormwater, drinking water, AMD. It's overlapping, but we always say that the continued support of those folks and the staff positions and the services that both the districts and regional groups and other nonprofits that you are all supporting through DEP through these grants are just so so needed to continue the work that's out there. And I'm wondering if is that a part of the state budget process that is still going to be an essential priority for Pennsylvania, because honestly, we all can't do this without the partnerships between these agencies. And I wish more federal agencies would understand, that the funding that does come down to the state gets leveraged by groups like ours and conservation districts with private investment and economic development opportunities to make a lot of these projects happen. They don't just happen through Zoom meetings and emails exchanges. You've got to meet people where they're at in these communities, and we often try to do that as best we can. And I'm always glad to see when yourself and other secretaries get out to the fields on some of the tours, and that goes for legislators herself, to come to the places where we're trying to do this work and see how important it is locally for that to happen. So I hope that continues within the department, and I'm sure you'll be an advocate for that. But do you see anything on the state level funding that might see that continues as well?
So, Growing Greener, I mean, that's for folks who might be unaware, Growing Greener is really a flagship environmental program for Pennsylvania. I think it's one of our most successful programs, if not the most successful program. We have been able to allocate over $1 billion over the last 25 years to environmental remediation projects. And one of the things that I have really tried to make a priority as secretary is taking those victory laps, going back and looking at the projects and making sure other people are looking at the projects and saying, what was the problem before? Because they are addressing real problems. We're using this money to address, real problems that affect people all across Pennsylvania, whether, it's pollution or flooding, which is what and those things oftentimes go hand in hand. But it's looking at, the watershed, figuring out what projects make the most sense. And, what I would say is we at DEP, in the control that we have over those funds, have tried to be as flexible as possible and to partner with those folks who have that expertise, those those specialists of the watershed, the folks who know it the best. And we've done, different things, not just in funding. One, we've tried to be more flexible in funding. We've tried to make it easier for folks to be able to access those dollars and get good projects funded. But we've also really tried to think outside the box, even in terms of permitting. Because if you are doing an environmental remediation project, you still got to get a permit. We've been trying to think how we can be more flexible even in our permitting processes for a lot of these watershed organizations and groups to be able to do the work that they want to do, need to do, have funds to do in those watersheds. I would love to see additional funding go into programs like Growing Greener, but we are just as happy to have funding with the ACAP program, which goes specifically towards agriculture. I am trying to do some education, I would say, with the legislature on Growing Greener, because it's a broader program. We can do more things with those funds, but it could definitely use an influx of additional funding. There's no shortage of projects, that's for sure.
Okay, Andy, I think you're up.
Yeah. You mentioned the Blacklick Creek Treatment Facility. Are there other similar projects underway that you know of at this point? And do you have any plans to go visit some of the other treatment systems that are still out there? We've got hundreds.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, on the visiting. Right now, we unfortunately have a travel restriction because of the state budget. But there are definitely other projects on my to-do list to go out to see. There are some really big projects underway right now that are in the planning and design phases that are similar to Blacklick Creek. One example was funded through one of those 319 grants. It's a system in Broad Top Township, Bedford County. For what's upcoming, there are two that are nearing the design phase completion, the Quake Cake treatment plant in Carbon County, and the Tioga Morris Run treatment plant in Tioga County. Each should be out for construction bid by this time next year. And the Quake Cake treatment plant will restore 9 miles of the Quake Cake Creek and the Black Creek, which are tributaries to the Lehigh River. The Tioga Morris Run treatment plant will restore 27 miles of Morris Run and the Tioga River. These two plants alone, so two, they're expected to be nearly $100 million in investment in Pennsylvania's waterways. So they are very large projects. And our various, grassroots and community-based organizations really play an important role in these treatment initiatives and getting these programs or getting these projects off the ground. In some cases, a lot of times they're the subrecipient of the funding and they do the contracting. In other cases, they advocate for projects to be initiated. And as you mentioned, they often leverage other funding and resources for monitoring and watershed-wide habitat enhancements and creation of public access points that are beyond the scope of our program, which is what you were saying earlier about being able to not just take the federal funding, but leverage additional funds. In all cases, community-based organizations have a role in promoting and enhancing recreational use of the waterways after the treatment project is complete. So, just to really stress those partnerships with those local watershed organizations are really, really critical to get these projects off the ground. There's just way too much work for DEP to accomplish it on our own. And we really value the partnerships that we have with those local organizations and groups to achieve these clean streams.
Bobby, I know you and Jessica were both mentioning Growing Greener program. I think you have another question regarding Growing Greener. Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking about as the continuation of that program goes into another round of funding here, that the efforts that are ongoing right now, they're definitely what we're seeing is there's a need for monitoring in place, because the way things have changed over the years and the number of groups that are out there that we've seen age, just in terms of their membership. And we've been around 30 some years almost and doing the work, but in some of these groups that we've worked with, they've aged out. They haven't had an influx of the youth, let's call it, of membership to come in. And so there's still this need in many of the communities to monitor and have funding to do that, to properly assess these mine discharges and to get the flows and chemistries that are necessary before we can decide what the next step is. And I know that that's always been a part of the early rounds of Growing Greener in 319 to make sure proper assessments are done. And it seems to be the same sort of thought that the Bureau of Abandoned Mine Reclamation has taken under their development side of the projects under the AMD, AML, and AMWR program. And just wondering, and so that from what we have heard and surveys that we've taken of our community groups across the state, that's a definite need to support that, because the technology is there now to do like monitoring, that we could download stuff with Bluetooth technology, and you don't have to be out there every single day. You could just gather data periodically, quarterly, and use that information to help with scaling of future AMD treatment systems and design based on the chemistry and the flow. And the funding that comes for that through the programs like Growing Greener is going to be vital. And we just want to kind of hope that continues to happen. And if you have seen or heard that might be what we need to do going forward.
No, I mean, I think all what you highlighted, I think, is incredibly valuable. And, as far as I am aware, there is no intention to change any of that.
Okay, good. All right. Well, with that, I know we want to kind of just give a plug here pretty shamelessly for this upcoming conference, and I'll let Andy ask you the last question here as we talk about what's going to happen next. But our statewide conference on abandoned mine reclamation is coming up here in 2 weeks, the 12th through the 14th of October in State College at Toft Trees. And we know Nate Houts is going to be down there presenting as one of our keynotes on behalf of the department. And that's in its 27th year. That brings our partners across the state to State College, and the halfway point of all of our community groups, our conservation district folks, our state, and some federal agencies. And, some have experienced some travel issues from what we're seeing with the budget concerns. But we're filling up pretty quickly, and today is the last day for registration before 5 o'clock today, if people want to get it in and get registered, because we do the registration in-house.
And Bobby, what is the website, a web address for the conference so people can get registered?
Okay, well, there it is. It's populated on the screen there. It's 2025.treatminewater.com if you're interested in attending the conference, which is sure to be very fun. It always is. It's like coming home week for folks from Eastern and Western Pennsylvania, and our bituminous and anthracite region folks get together and have a very good time at the conference. And there's some fun and games in addition to some very good presentations and track sessions throughout the day, and speakers galore that will be posted post-conference to our website, as we have done for decades now, going into our 27th year.
One more question for Jessica.
Trees this year? Wait, you said it's at Toft Trees? Oh, okay, that's nice.
Yeah.
One more final question for Jessica. Words of wisdom. Do you have words of wisdom to share with us?
Yeah, I would just really encourage folks working in this space to be creative and be willing to partner and share the load, and not be afraid to kind of think outside the box and try something new. I think for nonprofits, it's important for them to know that they're not alone, and that we do view them as incredibly important partners in this effort. We know that we're not alone. So really encourage folks to reach out to your respective county conservation districts and your DEP watershed managers, because these folks might be aware of additional partners, working in the space, or additional resources. You folks might be aware of additional partners and resources working in the space. And it's really just about, conversation and communication. really encourage folks to think about how they might be able to use local colleges and universities more. A lot of them are creating classes and programs that are focused on local environmental needs, and they're looking for projects for their students to partner on, which might help solve the problem with some of your watershed organizations and their age of members. And just to know that like organizational capacity and workforce development is a high priority issue across the Commonwealth. And if there's one thing that I am hopeful, I'm very hopeful about a lot of things, but I will say that a lot of the young people that I talk to are really engaged in environmental issues, and there's a passion that I think we can really, as environmental leaders and learners, can capitalize on, and try to attract young people to the environmental remediation efforts.
Bobby, you want to wrap it
well,
up?
Great. Yeah. So thanks again, Jessica. I really appreciate you coming on and joining us in this sort of inaugural first series in our first year, and bringing you on. We thought was very important to add to the mix of the folks that we're going to be having on throughout the year here. And we're really thankful to kind of have you as a friend and partner and colleague in this work that we're doing in abandoned mine reclamation across the state. So we want to encourage folks to please tune in on every Friday, first Friday of every month at 12 to 1 for new episodes of the Abandoned Mine Reclamation Chronicles here in Pennsylvania. And we have some interesting guests lined up. And we want you to mark your calendars for next month, for Friday, November 5th at 12 o'clock for our interview with the infamous Tom Clark, who's not our local weatherman, but this guy is a very good friend and colleague of mine, who's the Abandoned Mine Reclamation Program Coordinator for Kleinfelder. And you don't want to miss that episode following our Pennsylvania Abandoned Mine Reclamation Conference in October. And I'm sure he's going to have some really good stories to tell, and projects that Kleinfelder is working on, including the Tioga project and the Quake Egg project, among others, coming up next month in November. But we want to thank you for participating with us today, and look forward to catching up with you soon.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you. And a reminder, we still have advertising sponsorship opportunities remaining. Check it out, Camera Store. Until November 5th, everyone have a great month. We'll see you later. Take care. Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks, Jess.
Thank you.